Welcome back to Games Revealed. Today, I want to talk about some of my favorite games of all time. Now, this list is not my top 10. That list is going to be almost impossible to make because I have so many games that I love, like Half-Life. The series is my favorite, period. So I can definitely say that's my favorite game series. Which one's better? I have a hard time choosing, but I do choose one out of here. But I do play around with which choice. So definitely check out all my choices. I think they're amazing games, obviously, since they're some of my favorites, and I definitely think you should play them. And if you haven't yet, let me know in the comments why, or if you plan on playing some of these after you've heard. Or if you have played them, let me know your favorite experiences from those games. So before we get into it, make sure to like, subscribe, bash that bell with your crowbar. And then we're going to get into that one with our first game. Half-Life 2 is what I put down because that is actually probably my favorite one out of all of them, even though Half-Life Alyx was pretty baller. I love that game. Half-Life, though, and Black Mesa probably should be what you play first. I wouldn't recommend playing Half-Life 2 until you've played Half-Life 1 or Black Mesa. One being the older style graphics, the other one being a fan remake, but sanctioned by Valve. I'll be honest, this is a hard one. I know hardcore fans really like Half-Life more than Black Mesa, but if you're new to the whole series, Black Mesa is just going to be a little bit better experience. But then you can play Half-Life 2, which is just primo. Okay, the story is you're a scientist, especially in Half-Life. Well, in Half-Life 1, you're definitely a scientist. In Half-Life 2, actually, I guess in both of them, you're just a task rabbit. You just go around and do tasks for people. So really, in this, you're supposed to be a physicist, essentially, and you go around and essentially help start the end of the world in Half-Life 1. I'm not going to go much more into that, but you do have to resolve some of those issues in Half-Life 2 with a lot of cool aliens that come into the world. And it's a sci-fi alien first-person shooter, and the protagonist doesn't talk. He's got a goatee, and he's awesome, and it just doesn't get better. Like, the story that's told through this game has been used in multiple games since. This is a very fundamental Series 2 first-person shooters, just like Doom was. So really, the design of this, just the whole concept of Half-Life has held up to the ages, and it probably will be one of the most ageless games to ever come out, because you can go back. The clarity is still pretty awesome playing Half-Life 1. It's amazing. I love it, and it really just holds up and from so many different aspects. There's a lot of games on my list that don't necessarily, but this one does, and this one has an amazing mod community. It still has mods being released to this day. Just a couple of days ago from when I recorded this, there was a new mod that came out for Half-Life, and full story. Like, is this a story mod? This is so cool. So the community is so rich, so amazing. This is one of the best game series, if you can get into it, that will just give you hours upon hours, hundreds of hours of time to play. Mods, whatever it is, you have tons of time in this. Okay, second choice, Dead Space 1. Amazing. Dead Space 2 is my favorite. This is once again another one where I think I like the second one more. But Dead Space 1 is it's just amazing. You're sent to go, essentially, you're finding your girlfriend, but you're also there to help figure out what happened to the spaceship. And essentially, a lot of shit has happened to the spaceship, and it turns into a horror fest with gore and just essentially beating walls as the ship is getting taken over by multiple different creatures of the same race, I guess. They just morph into different things, but the necromorphs. And so it's the worst way to become a zombie, in my opinion. Besides, Half-Life does have a pretty bad way where you become a zombie in that one. But in this one, you just essentially just turn into this creature, and it's all because of this energy from one of these things. If I can find it. Where is it? Oh, well. Yeah, so an energy from energy, and so it's just terrifying. The game design is a third-person shooter that where you can shoot your way out, play with guns. You got a plasma cutter which shoots out into lines, and each one can be modified just a little bit differently in the sense that's like first and secondary attacks. And the whole atmosphere of this game just even holds up to this day. It's still such a good game to play in the dark, still freaky as all can be, still fun as can be. And so this one's a cult classic. The community is still fairly strong. It's not like massive, but I do think it's gotten bigger, and I do think EA made some huge mistakes by not continuing this, but they're going to remedy that. They are fixing that with Dead Space 1 remake. So you could always hold off until the remake, or you play the original. The original holds up really well. I actually don't even think they need a remake for this one. So number 2. Number 3 now is Witcher 3, which kind of hilarious that worked out that way. But Witcher 3 has an amazing story. It has great gameplay. Like, the gameplay is one of those things where you can easily run off, hit all those check marks, and just easily put about 100 to 200 hours into this game. And that's what makes this game so much fun. Sometimes I don't like long games. I like to finish a game, but this is one game I'm glad I didn't finish it too soon. So I'm just so happy that I played this one. And it did take me a year and a half to fully beat it, including the DLC. It was 200 hours sunk into this thing, and it was some of the best 200 hours of my life. And I love that game and that series. And despite popular belief of having to start from the first, like with Half-Life 1, Dead Space 1, Witcher 3, you don't need to start from Witcher 1 or 2. I just couldn't get into those games very much. But Witcher 3, it has enough backstory in it that you can get the full thing and just enjoy it. It's awesome. I really like it. It's third person action. You have a sword. You have some limited powers, including some fire powers and some other. I'm going very basic. I'm not going to say what they are in the game, just so that you have a better idea. If I use the names in the game, you wouldn't really know what they are. And then you have like a shield, and you go through a fantasy world that's ravaged by war at times, or by creatures that you have to slay. That's essentially what a Witcher does. He goes and slays creatures and is a hired mercenary to take out bad things that will kill everyone in the world. It really is one of those games that I think will also last the tests of time, I guess. It just will be a game that holds up, I think. It's just one of those games. In fact, a lot of the games I have on this list, except for 1 or 2, hold up pretty well. And that's one that I'm excited to play on my Steam Deck. Okay, so number 4, Starcraft II. Love this game. Starcraft 1, it's another one that you probably want to play Starcraft 1 before playing Starcraft 2. The story is really good in both. They do a great job, I believe, where essentially there's 3 races. This Terran race, which was out, and this is in a different galaxy, I believe. And they're Earthlings, but they don't live on Earth. They live in a different galaxy. They're outlaws at one point, and they were banished out into space. Kind of like taking a little bit of note from the Britain outlawing, banishing outlaws and prisoners to Australia, kind of like that. It's kind of similar concept. That's probably where they pulled it from. Going too far into that, into that little piece. But yes, they have the Zerg, Terran, and Protoss. 2 creatures created by one not creatures, but species created by one super species. And there's much more to the story, but all I know is Raynor is awesome. I love him. He's one of my favorite characters in gaming. And so really go and go try that game out. It's an RTS. I guess I should say that. It's top down. You can control your units. You have to like mine minerals, build units, go and attack. And yes, some of the story and some of the gameplay is a little different depending on which missions you have to do. If you're doing the single player, the multiplayer is pretty intensive. You have to do a lot of actions per minute with the mouse and all that. It's all around just a fun game. I definitely recommend it. And if you haven't tried an RTS before, or if you just like RTSs, you'll love StarCraft. It's also sci-fi if you couldn't tell. Number 5 is Resident Evil 7. This is a hard one for me. I like all the Resident Evils. I definitely think you should play Resident Evil, Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. I think it's worth it to try to play them in a row, but really you don't need to. Especially with Resident Evil 7, it's kind of a break off, even though it's in the same world. You play as a different protagonist, and you really get the shit beaten out of you in this game. But it's a fun journey, and you know what? There's family. Family's always, nothing's bad when family's involved, and so you have a very loving family to be a part of, and just enjoy this game. It's horror, mind you, and it is a first person, which is usually a third person or like camera folk. I don't know what the original Resident Evils would be considered, but they were from different camera angles as you moved a character across. Then it went to third person, and then now it's first person. And to be honest, the first person is really sick in this. I really like first person shooters, and it really intensifies the horror aspect and just the gore here. It is, if you like horror games and you like a little bit of action, a little bit of freakiness, Resident Evil 7 is your game. Really, and it's gonna hold up, I think, for a very long time. All the Resident Evils hold up, especially the remakes. Like the remakes that they're doing with Resident Evil 2 is just awesome. It's a great story. It's a great series. It's a great story. Some Resident Evils are obviously better than others, but this is one of those ones that's just fun to get into. So you have that one to try. Okay, next up is my number 6, which is Mass Effect 2, and that is another hard one. Mass Effect 2 is my favorite out of the series, but you should probably play Mass Effect 1. It just doesn't hold up. This is one of those series where Mass Effect 2 holds up so much better than Mass Effect 1. It's not even funny. And even with the Legendary Edition, I still had a hard time getting through the first one because I knew the sweet, sweet goodness that was in Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 1, still, I recommend trying to play through Mass Effect 1. Highly recommend trying to get through Mass Effect 1 or watching a YouTube video on it just so that you know the story, because the whole story, the arching story for Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 is just one of the most iconic game series stories in all of gaming. And there's a reason why people love this. It is sci-fi. It's a third-person shooter-esque with a squad element where you can control your squad mates. And the game design is essentially you just wandering across the galaxy. Depending on which one, it gets more and more intense where you can wander around with your ship. So you're like a commander of a ship. You can fly across the galaxy exploring planets. Some planets you can land, some planets you can just mine for resources. It's very much, if you want to be in like StarCraft meets Star Trek, that's what this is. I feel like it's the most realistic sci-fi game technically, even though the guns and some other things feel very sci-fi-y. It still feels like a fairly realistic sci-fi, and I really like that. Great game. Okay, number 7 is Bioshock. This, and you can tell, like, I think I kind of like horror games, and Bioshock is definitely one that's a horror game. You find yourself in a plane crash, and you essentially land, your body, I guess, lands in the water near a lighthouse. You go up to the lighthouse and then find out, oh, hey, there's an elevator down into this underwater city. And it's essentially to get away from the rules of the world. We can do what we want, experiment, build ourselves better. And you get to see the dystopian that comes from that without having too many regulations. It's one of those games that gets you really thinking a lot. And I love a game that can get you thinking about the world you're in, your politics, whatever it is. This is one where I love, and just being underwater, this one I still think actually holds up pretty well. It's just so beautiful. Just the concept of being under this much water, just so far down. I love the game for this. It's a first person shooter with, you get a ranch, you get some other stuff, you get revived in these back to shoot things. That's not what it's called, but essentially that's kind of how I think you respawn if you die, is you just get respawned in a tube. And yeah, underwater. That's really all you got to know. It's really good. It has big daddies in it, which are, these essentially diver units that have big giant drills that take care of little sisters. And I don't need to ruin the whole story for you. It's so good. You gotta play it. And on to the next option, or next one on my list, I guess. Number 8, Fallout New Vegas. This one is a hard one. It does not hold up well. It does and it doesn't. I shouldn't say that. I really love the Fallout games. Fallout New Vegas is my favorite one. It's one I'm going to play a ton on the Steam Deck, and the story is essentially you get kind of betrayed. You're essentially a delivery. Like, to be honest, it's one of the only unique storylines of the Fallouts. Everything else is fairly generic, I feel like, when it comes to the main character. This one, though, you are delivering, I believe, a token or news or something like that to New Vegas's boss, I believe, or I'm not explaining this story very well. I don't remember, to be honest. That's not why I play this game, is the story fully, but it has pages from history, and it's interesting. They have the Khans, which is obviously based off of Genghis Khan. It has Roman-like centurions and just Roman group or settlement or whatever, where they will crucify people. They're pretty ruthless. And then they have the New Vegas group, which is, I think, more or less from California, New California, or something like that, which is like a new country slash governance. And yeah, you just wander around the New Vegas area, which I grew up kind of by it. And so I got to experience everything in that area from like a consolidated area game. It's obviously not as vast as it really is, but it has some cool stuff, a lot of hidden things. It has a lot of fun lore in it with ghouls, zombies, and death claws, things that will just massacre you. I'll give you some advice. If you're starting out, don't go left, go right. That's the best advice I can give you. The weapons do degrade, and it is very much an open world. Got to loot and shoot. First person shooter. Okay, on to number 9, Portal 2. Portal 1 is good. Portal 2 is amazing, and it's because of the robots in it. The story that you get from this, the snarkiness, you can just, there's so much good about this game. I don't want to ruin any one aspect of it, but you're still in a test chamber trying to get through these tests, and then you eventually escape, and then you have to experience Aperture Science's bizarre underground world and its researching, and it's essentially experiments. It's an amazing game. It's first person, kind of shooter-esque with the portal gun, and you just have to solve puzzles. It's a first person portal shooter puzzle solver with an amazing story that's snarky and all can be. I love it. And the main character is a female, she's badass. So love it. Another character that doesn't speak, but it's made by Valve, by the same people that do Half-Life. That's another reason why it's amazing, because they do amazing stuff. Okay, let's go on to the last item on my list, because this is getting a little long. Borderlands 2 is my number 10, if I can count. And the reason I like this is because it is the most balanced. Borderlands 1 was a little boring. I have a hard time ever going back and playing that. I really do. It's just okay. Borderlands 2 is where this series really opened up for me. I loved it. It has Jack, who's the antagonist, and you have some badass choices for protagonists. You get to choose up to 4 different characters, plus some DLC characters, which actually has my favorite character in it. But it's a first-person shooter looter, where you get to shoot things and you get to loot things, and they claim to have like millions of guns or something like that. They have a pretty audacious claim. It kind of gets a little redundant, but they still have some really fun guns in that game. The story's really good. It's the best one, I think, out of the whole series. It really has everything. It has betrayal. It has just sadness. People die. I shouldn't say things like that, but I'm not going to say who dies. It could be you, maybe, if you're bad at the game. But really, definitely recommend that one if you can get past the it's sci-fi-esque. I guess it is sci-fi, open world, just dystopian kind of world. It's a universe. You're on this one planet that's kind of just like crappy, but it's there for the resources with mega corporations, just consuming everything throughout the universe. And this is one of those. It has great lore. It's really fun, and it's also funny and snarky. and I do love a good sense of humor in a game. So really, that's it. That's all I have for my list. I have more lists later down, but I'm gonna have to hit those lists some other day. This is just the first part of this series that I'll do over the next, who knows, months, years, who knows how long. But I love these games so much, and I hope you do too. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments which one of these games you have played, or which one is your favorite out of this list. If you haven't played any of these, let me know why. Maybe it's time to change that. So catch you guys later. Check out my other videos, and peace out. Later.